final movie reviews for 2014 for the month of December. I'm looping them all together, or compiling them all together, because there's just no time to finish them all individually. First movie up is HOBBIT, which was filmed in Halifax, Nova Scotia. It is a movie about a girl who's trying to recover from a separation from a boyfriend, and also deal with the fact that she loves to perform music for an audience. Was really crazy about doing so, but when she appears before an audience, she freezes up and passes out, so she's trying to overcome that. And she's a bisexual and is trying to discover how to adjust to that sort of situation. She lives alone in her grandmother's house, wears her grandmother's outfits, and is adjusting to becoming another person. Recommendation, yeah, this was a rather delightful film, and if you want to see where the city that I like most in the world, that this is the place. All the film shots here. I recognize the companies and stores that were used. There's a film when I lived with my grandmother in Halifax, which is where this movie takes place. You'll notice there's a music store in this movie where she hangs out with this drummer lesbian girl. And I bought my first musical instrument, a flute, at this particular music store way back when I was a child, and it was nice to see that it still exists under new ownership, of course, but still exists in this film. Recommend it? Yes, I would. This is a very pleasant film to watch, and you'll enjoy very much. The next film is Stephen Hawking's biography called The Theory of Everything. It's about his love life, his marriage to his wife. Stephen Hawking, who's now 71, is the only person to outlive the disease that crippled him and took away his motor functions. He can just move his eyelid. It's called Lou Gehrig's disease. He can just move his eyelids now, and he can't do anything else. 71 years old, and you know, you got to ask yourself, why did he outlive everybody else? What makes him so different? He also outlived catching pneumonia. He also outlived getting run down by a car while in his wheelchair. This is a very cool movie. If you know anybody who has a handicap, this really clues into that. It's inspirational in the fact that he survived and he made it, and yet, even though the body wasn't working, the mind was still working and the brain was still working, so he functions very much and behaves very much like a normal man. And the struggle comes across clearly in this movie. Very much recommend this if you're into physics and the study of the universe. Here's one of the top scientists of all time, and a private look into his personal life. Stephen Hawking's amazing human being. Very much recommend this movie. The Penguins of Madagascar, a cartoon. This is a really pleasant family film. Even individually you'll enjoy it. There's a lot of laughs here. These penguins are hilarious. You will enjoy them very much. The cartoon is beautiful to watch, beautiful to look at. Humor is right on target. There's not really a lot of graphic violence. There is some violence in here, but it's not really that bad. The film is, I'd recommend it for maybe 4-year-olds and up. The kids were a little bit apprehensive at first when they were watching the film, but they got into the film began to laugh and began to shout out comments as the movie played. Recommended for families, for children, individuals. If you're into animation, yeah, but if you're not, then this movie's not going to interest you. Penguins of Madagascar is about, it was how this group of penguins began. I can't remember the exact number now. It's been a while since I saw this film. I've never seen any of the Penguins films except for the general one Madagascar movie. It shows the beginning and how they form into a union and like a military troop, and it turns out that they become secret agents, or they're recruited to be secret agents to retrieve a formula from a mad octopus scientist who's getting revenge because he was ignored at the marine aquarium. So he's getting revenge on all humans by having them attacked by, instead of cute penguins, penguins that turned into monsters, little green men or deformed beasts, to gross out the people. And these penguins penguins of Madagascar have to recover the formula and spray all the other penguins to turn them back into cute, cuddly penguins. And that's basically what the whole movie's about. A romantic comedy starring and put together by Chris Rock. This isn't really a comedy so much as it is an exploration of a man's desire. Like many comedians get tired eventually of doing comedy and they want to break into something else like drama. John Candy being one of them went through the same thing. Charlie Chaplin being another person who went through the same thing. Trying to show your audience that you're more of just a funny man, that you actually can do drama. And Bill Murray made an attempt to do this and has become successful at it eventually. And this is what this whole movie's about. Now, the Chris Rock character is also dealing with this really horrible critic that's been following him around, and he doesn't really know who this is because it's on magazines, newspapers, online. And eventually he meets this woman who had disguised herself as this critic, and the two of them, she interviews him as they go along. He doesn't know that this is his critic enemy, and eventually finds out, wants to dump her, but that's what basically the movie's about, his transition into doing something serious from comedy and how he approaches it and how he deals with it, and meeting up with this #1 enemy critic, and then the two of them fall for each other as friends, and she becomes to understand him better as a person rather than as a really poor judge of movies and comedy, and he finally meets his nemesis, and that's what, this is the basic film. I found it to be a rather dull movie, but the African-Canadian members of the audience were laughing out loud all the time. They enjoyed Kevin Hart's performance. They enjoyed all the comedy and all the one-liners that were put out by the background characters. They were having a really great time. Maybe because I was too tired to watch this, I'm not sure, but I found it kind of dull, but I would recommend it as a good piece about a man or anybody who's trying to go from comedy to serious drama. This really covers it quite well. Citizenfour, one of the best movies of the year for me. This is about Edward Snowden, the hero of freedom of information and freedom of the press. This is about him having to deal with the American intelligence agencies and their influence on other governments in the world. Really recommend this. Edward Snowden should actually be given the keys to the city of every country on the planet. This is now one of my heroes because he's so brave to stand up to do what he does, do what he did. But the fact that he was smart enough to get away with it, and a good thinking man. This is not a dramatic depiction of Edward Snowden. This is actually a documentary of Edward Snowden. It had a fairly good audience. It wasn't that popular, but it had a fairly good audience. I recommend this if you're interested in freedom of the press and freedom of expression and freedom of knowledge for all people, because this shows the National Security Agency of the United States had, after the attack on the World Trade Centers, they had become like a secret government body that had nobody above them telling them not to do things or or to curb their behavior. And this movie depicts and shows that what happens when old white guys become their own agency, their own dictators. And this was a formation of a separate government running the United States within the United States, to the point where they were getting to the point where they were becoming a dictatorship, and they could have eventually enough power from what they were doing. I mean, they were spying on over 1,300,000 American citizens in the United States that have no criminal background are being spied on presently by this agency, the NSA, just because they criticize the NSA. This is very much like a Nazi organization. I'd recommend this movie for those of you who are fighting for freedom. This government agency lies to its upper government agency, and it influences them through bribes and threats. And it does so not just in the United States, but trying to influence other agencies outside the United States to do whatever they want. To a point, their spying just got to the point where it was becoming so ridiculous that they were spying on other governments, friendly governments in the world, setting up incredible amounts of intelligence gathering. It's just, if you watch this movie, you'll see just how bad it was, and how quickly the United States was going to become a dictatorship of these old white-haired intelligence operatives from below the Congress, from below the President's office, from below the House of Representatives. They were just going to do whatever they wanted, and they could enforce it. It just also shows the harassment that the press went through trying to cover Edward Snowden's activities. Exodus, Gods and Kings. This is a very good movie if you're just looking for an action adventure. This movie has very little to do with the Bible. I've read this story of Moses maybe 30 sometimes, and I can tell you that this movie just, where they got their information from, it's like somebody had told the director or told the writer about the story of Moses, and they sat down patiently and listened, and then they formed their own opinions on Moses and what actually happened in the Exodus, and then they made a movie out of it, because there's very little, in this movie there's very little actual Moses story here. This is mostly fiction, even though don't be religious and look at this movie as being a religious adaptation of what happened at the Exodus. The ending scenes of the plagues were very quick. It was a lot worse than what they were depicting, but I mean, there was no attacking crocodiles, plague of crocodiles, that didn't exist. So would I recommend this movie? Only if you're into an action adventure that has nothing to do with religion. Yeah, go ahead. But beyond that, don't even bother. If you're religious and you're looking for a religious movie, this is definitely not it. The movie Wild. The movie Wild, Witherspoon's movie. I gotta give hats off to Witherspoon for showing her naked body in this film. and it works very well. It shows her the scars that you can get from hiking and the damage to your body from hiking if you're not wearing the proper equipment, or you're just abusing your body by overdoing it. The scars in this woman's body were, I mean, you weren't turned on by the nudity, you were gasped by just how beat up she was and how beat up she looked. This is not exactly straight drama. I was expecting from what I saw and what I heard from critics that this would be a straight through drama, that she would this was a really emotionally grabbing, gripping movie, but it wasn't. It was just a woman who was dealing with the death of her mother in the worst way possible. She was just looking for pleasure at every angle, so she chose to throw herself into sex with anybody who wanted it, and ingesting and taking, injecting heroin into her body so she could feel good, and had to deal with losing her mother, who she adored very much. The entire family was destroyed by an abusive, alcoholic prick of a husband. This is a true story. This is a dramatic rendition of a book that this real woman wrote about traveling, walking from the Mexico-United States border up to the Canadian-United States border, and what she encountered along the way. This woman was very brave at what she did. I don't recommend anybody do this, but I think maybe she needed to get a lot of heavy weight off her mind and out of her system, which she successfully did eventually. As an adventure movie, watch this film. As a psychology movie, watch this movie. As a sociology movie, watch this movie. This is an incredible film. Highly recommend it. And the last movie, and the best movie I've seen this year, is The Imitation Game. It's a story about Alan Turing. This is a dramedy. Yeah, there's a lot of humor in this film. It's not just a straightforward dramatic presentation of what Turing was like and what he was going through. Turing was emotionally damaged and underdeveloped in his personality, which made him very good at doing puzzles. He saw things as, if you watch Star Trek and you're dealing with Mr. Spock and how the Vulcans deal with life and the way they see things as straight black and white issues with no in-betweens. One-liners or humorous jokes are considered to be facts presented, and that's how Turing saw life. If you could say something to him just to be sarcastic, he would think it was real. If you said to him a joke, he'd think that was real, that it wasn't, that you weren't saying a joke, that you were telling him a statement. And because of that, he had the ability to see into puzzles and work them out very quickly, which made him, Professor Turing, an ideal candidate, because he became a professor, I think around the age of 24, an ideal candidate to handle the World War II Nazi a coding machine called Enigma, which the Allies had captured or had been given from Polish intelligence straight from Berlin. So they had one of these machines, but they couldn't figure out MI6. British intelligence is divided into MIs, military intelligence. There's military intelligence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 is unknown and not written about. Turing was recruited to this find out how Enigma works project. The problem was that each day at 12 o'clock midnight, the Nazis would reprogram the coding machine, because they were sending all their messages live. Anybody, even a little kid, could pick up their signals and messages, but nobody could uncode it, because the coding needed to translate these messages would change at midnight every day and not start again until 6 in the morning. But the Nazis made a mistake. They kept one word the same, like weather. Weather in the message was always in the same position, and each message ended with Heil Hitler. Eventually, Turing figured out those 3 words in the coding, and he was able to look at the messages coming through and notice these exact same sequences coming up on each message for certain periods of time, and was able to translate back from that every time this certain coding letters came up, that this was the key. That was the key code. And that's how they solved the problem of the Enigma. They eventually got it. Turing was responsible for saving about 16 million extra deaths from World War II, and possibly the Germans conquering the world. Britain was losing until they got that coding machine corrected. Turing figured out pretty much right away that trying to come up with millions and millions upon millions of possibilities to solve this coding problem could actually be done by a machine, another machine tackling another machine, and he was correct. And as a result, Turing is the father of computers. Now, when the war ended, he got caught for being a homosexual, and the government did not know about his activities during World War II and how much of he was a hero. He ended the war by, everybody guesses, by about 2 years. And as a result of being caught as a homosexual, Turing was taken by the British government. They could not reveal his MI5 helping out with the war. He was just considered to be working in a radio room, or radio factory. Turing was castrated, and the first year into his chemical castration process, he couldn't take it anymore, and he killed himself. So much for being a hero and the remarkable things that he did. This is a really terrific story. The first day I went, the first performance was sold out, the second performance was sold out. I had to go at a midnight run. 80% of the seats were taken. The next day I came by and people were lined up outside the theater, right down the sidewalk. It's an incredible movie. It's very popular. This is probably the best movie for me of 2014. Very much recommend it. It is a tragic story, but it also has its humor points. And it just goes to show you that heroes can be in all forms. There was a homosexual by the name of Rom who put Hitler into power. He was the leader of the brown shirts. Hitler eventually killed him and replaced him with the SS. But it was also a homosexual man who destroyed Hitler in the end by developing this machine that could pick up on all Hitler's military codes. What can I say? The real heroes of the world are eventually found out about, but not realized at the time of their acts. Turing's work was kept secret by government order for 50 years. It wasn't until the end of the 1990s that we discovered that Alan Turing did what he did and how the Enigma code was cracked. Go to this movie. I think you'll like it very much. And to just add on to what I just said, mustn't forget The Hobbit, the Battle of the Five Armies. A rather great ending to the series. And it also is a conclusion and a furtherance of the films, because now you can see them all in their entirety. All 6 movies put together, the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So this completes the circle, you might say, and pay particular attention to the elves and their military operations. It's just so coordinated. It's actually very beautiful to watch, and their military outfits and equipment is perfectly elfian. Very much recommend this. A lot of people who have read the Tolkien books do not want to see this movie or go to this movie or have anything to do with this series, because there are characters in these films that don't exist in the books, and it kind of like throws off the movie and the books for these people. But if you're looking for a great adventure, the Battle of the Five Armies will definitely be it. It's just an excellent series, and it's perfectly designed for a box set of 6 films. If you watch The Hobbits first and then The Lord of the Rings second. The Hobbits lead to kind of a tragic end to a point. Bilbo does return home, and what the movie is about, well, they kill the dragon, obviously. The dragon takes his revenge on the townsfolk in the river, or the lake people, and he destroys the lake and kills most of the people. The dragon dies, he gets killed, and the castle with all the gold in it returns to the dwarves, who fight almost to the very end. They almost all die because of the orc attack. The orcs are very brilliant, but lousy fighters when it comes to the elves. The elves were incredible fighters. The dwarves were really great fighters as well, but they were no match for the orcs. And Bilbo returns home at the end of the film, and you'll see my favorite number, 22, at the end of the film. It's the only number in the movie. And that's it for the films for 2015. Oh yeah, and before I forget, Happy New Year, 2015.